North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells on an internationally sad day. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. Today, earlier this afternoon in Great Britain, Queen Elizabeth died. She died at Balmoral Castle. She died peacefully, from what we understand. She passed away in the company of some of her family. And it was something that people had been expecting, but hoping would not be something that we would deal with for some time to come. I have to admit to being just a bit shocked at the last time I saw her, which was when she greeted the new prime minister. Ms. Truss showed up, and what ended up happening is that she looked very, very small. She was never a large person to begin with, but she had a certain stature that we had grown used to over the years, and she was decidedly much thinner. And that she went rather quickly is kind of a surprise. The health of the Queen has always been a private matter. The family is very ill at ease to discuss family health matters, and that is the case here. So we're probably not going to find out very much about what caused the death of Queen Elizabeth at age 96, but we will hear something at some time, I'm sure. It is a very sad day. It is a very sad day, and we are hoping that this will lead to a better day for England. But there are already certain voices of consternation that we will deal with as we can. It is a circumstance that involves whether or not people want the new king. Who will that king be? Well, as it turns out, he will be Prince Charles III. Excuse me, King Charles III. He will be elevated to the monarchy in a very short amount of time. But he is certainly acting in that role as we speak. And we will, by the way, do our best to join the BBC, the definitive authority on all of this, as soon as we get a live feed, which was moving along fine, and then all of a sudden sort of blinked out. But let me bring you up to date as to what has happened. The longest ever reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the only monarch most of her subjects have ever known, is over. Elizabeth Alexandra May Windsor died Thursday at Balmoral Castle, her estate in Scotland. She was 96. The palace issued a black-bordered statement at 6:30 p.m. local time. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Her eldest son and heir apparent to the throne, Prince Charles, Prince of Wales, is 73 years old. He immediately became King Charles III upon her death. There was a conversation regarding the possibility that he may indeed choose a different name, which is not unprecedented, but I think would have been very interesting to see. He will be King Charles III. His wife, Camilla Bowles, the former Camilla Bowles, will now become Queen Consort Camilla, which is also unprecedented, but interesting nonetheless. When you have a family lineage and a monarchy going back well over a millennium, then obviously there's been an awful lot of precedent set. And she will not be Ms. Camilla, excuse me, I think she's she's a duchess. I don't believe she's the Duchess of Wales. She has a royal title. I will try to find that for you. Anyway, she will be a queen consort. And I'm sure that that's happened in the past of the royal family before. Buckingham Palace issued another black bordered statement from His Majesty the King, which was beautifully written, and so on. Quote, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly at the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." Unquote. As the 41st monarch since William the Conqueror in 1066, Elizabeth was the symbol of stability as Britain and the 1,000-year-old monarchy sailed through the rolling storms of the modern age, including a deadly coronavirus pandemic. Queen Elizabeth enjoyed robust health most of her life, but lingering mobility issues affected her in recent months. She increasingly handed over duties to Charles from the recreational to the constitutional. Last week, she could not attend the annual Highland Games, the Braemar Gathering, which she never missed throughout her reign. Tuesday, she presided over the transition of one prime minister to a new one, a constitutional duty as head of the state, which took place at Balmoral for the first time in her reign. On Wednesday, yesterday, the palace announced she would not be able to attend via Zoom the meeting of the Privy Council, the standing committee of senior governmental advisors, basically their cabinet, after the doctor's orders to rest. She also missed significant appearances in June during the 4 days of celebration of her Platinum Jubilee of 70 years on the throne. In February, 2 weeks after marking the 70th anniversary of her ascension to the throne in 1952, the palace announced she had tested positive for COVID-19. During an audience in mid-February, the Queen mentioned to her visitors that she had difficulty moving, leading to ongoing mobility issues, as Buckingham Palace put it, that prevented some appearances, including the state opening of Parliament on May 10th. She had missed this important head of state role only twice before or during her reign, both for pregnancies. But for the first time, she officially delegated Charles to stand in for her, accompanied by his eldest son, Prince William. She was preceded in death by Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, her husband of 73 years, who died April 9th, 2021 at Windsor Castle at age 99. Just short of his 100th birthday, he was Britain's oldest and longest-serving royal spouse in 10 centuries. His funeral yielded poignant pictures of the Queen, alone and masked, in St. George Chapel at Windsor for a sublime service, attended by only 30 members of his family, amid COVID-19 restrictions. At the end of March, she appeared in public for her first major in-person gathering since her COVID-19 diagnosis, leading her family, dozens of foreign royals, and hundreds of Britain's great and good in a service of thanksgiving for her life of her late husband at Westminster Abbey. The death of a monarch is followed by a flurry of rituals, including an address to the nation by the new king and by the prime minister, followed by a long-established funeral plan carried out with military precision. For now, however, Britain prepared to mourn. The plans include a funeral worthy of the devout and dutiful woman who pledged herself at age 21 in service to her nation and never wavered as the living symbol of the British people. She reigned, never ruled, as Britain's head of state and constitutional figurehead for decades. She succeeded to the throne on February 6, 1952, when her father, King George VI, died at age 56. She was only 25 years old. Having celebrated her Diamond Jubilee of 60 years on the throne in 2012, she was the UK's oldest monarch ever and the longest serving, surpassing her great-great-great-grandmother, it's only two greats, great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who reigned 63 years and died in 1901. More than half the people alive today in Britain have known no other monarch on the throne. Their coins, their banknotes, their stamps, a modest, even shy girl, she became the most famous woman in the world, the most photographed and depicted human being in history, who met and shook hands with an estimated 4 million people or more during her reign. She inherited a sun never sets on the British Empire just beginning to disintegrate. She then presided over its final collapse into a commonwealth of nations that looked to her as its leader, and to which she was deeply committed to the very end. She was Britain's stiff upper lip during the 20th century post-World War II recovery, the last gasps of the empire, the Cold War, and the war on terrorism. In her colorful hat, sturdy, sensible shoes, her ever-present handbag on her arm, she was a constant, though kaleidoscopic. Well, let's see. Okay, she was a constant through. Oh, there she was. She was a constant through kaleidoscopic changes in the 20th century as it roared into the 21st. The growth of television, Beatlemania, Britain's demographic transformation to a multi-ethnic society, and the rise of a celebrity culture that ensnared nearly every member of her family. She adapted to changing times by changing, and yet not changing on the important things, such as maintaining a dignified silence, while embracing the internet age with a palace website, Facebook and Twitter accounts, even a royal channel on YouTube. She was stoic, and she carried on. And that's one of her very famous quotes. It was, "Be calm and carry on." You know those posters? Yeah, remain calm. Sorry. Remain calm and carry on. She was stoic, carried on through the antics and scandals of members of her family. Most recently, she had to weather the public downfall of her son, Prince Andrew, for his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, which later led to an embarrassing civil lawsuit accusing him of sexual abuse. And her grandson, Prince Harry's decision to move to America with his wife, Meghan, and leave royal life behind, resulting in months of recriminations, further inflamed by accusations of racism, which were hotly denied by the royal family. When it was necessary, she shed her usual reserve. She presided over the heart-rending 1997 funeral of her former daughter-in-law, Princess Diana, the people's princess. She did it despite her desire to protect Charles and Diana's two sons, to save the standing of the monarchy from a grief-maddened populace, enraged by what seemed to be royal coldness and detachment in the wake of Diana's death in a car crash in Paris. Queen Elizabeth is dead at age 96. We are going to see what we can do about perhaps joining the BBC. And we're hoping that we'll be able to make that happen because they are obviously the channel of choice in this particular coverage. We will do our best to make that happen as we continue today on this very sad day, not just for England, but indeed for the world. The death of Queen Elizabeth, expected yet somehow surprising. And it is a sad day for many people. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We will continue our broadcast in just a moment. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. In case you were just joining us, Queen Elizabeth has died. She was 96 years old. She passed away earlier today. This was the statement of British Prime Minister Liz Truss.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
Liz Truss, who is the brand new Prime Minister of England, on the passing of Queen Elizabeth. It has been very somber coverage at the BBC. I've been watching it for most of the morning. I am hoping to share some of it with you, but there are technical difficulties, as you might imagine, with virtually everyone around the world tapping into their live streams. They are obviously shocked, even though she was 96, and even though her doctors had pointed out that they had asked her to please stop enjoying her nightly martini, which I always thought was ridiculous. Why don't you let the woman have her martini, please? Apparently, they knew best. Alicia asks, what did I miss? Queen Elizabeth is dead at age 96. There is a new sovereign in England. He is King Charles III. Are people happy about that? Well, that comes with mixed answers. We'll have those for you coming up. This is the Wells Report, back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being with us today. We're working on coverage of the loss of the Queen of England. She has passed away at age 96. King Charles is now taking over. He will be King Charles III. That is the official word. We just had a moment to spend a little bit of time with regards to finding out a little bit more about what is going on, and it's one of those situations where there are obviously different ideas about different things. Prince Charles has been a polarizing figure in England, especially over the circumstance having to do with the death of Princess Diana. And it is not something that is easily understood by most of us, because there are certain levels of behavior and certain circumstances that are lost on Americans because we have a different set of manners, etc. It is just a different culture. And some of the things that were egregious violations of those particular standards and mores, etc., in England were looked at by going, so? But there are people that are not especially happy about the fact that, indeed, Prince Charles is the new sovereign. He is no longer a prince, in fact. He is King Charles III as we have this conversation. This is an opinion piece from Louise Branson. She is an opinion contributor to USA Today. The king or queen is dead. Long live the king or queen. Britons last heard those traditional words on the death of the monarch in 1952 as Queen Elizabeth II succeeded her father, King George VI. Nobody younger than today could possibly remember her glittering Westminster Abbey coronation the following year, the Britain's 39th since the year 1066. The person who wrote this, is British. She has never known another monarch. Queen Elizabeth II has been it, as seemingly immortal fixture as Big Ben. But as the Queen Elizabeth II era has ended at 96, she was Britain's longest serving monarch. Illness kept her from some engagements. Britain is now facing the unthinkable. Now that's what the writer of this story, Louise Branson, is talking about. They now face the unthinkable. Oh my. Queen Elizabeth II is gone. King Charles III will be the new monarch. Now here's the story. King Charles III is not the monarch most Britons want, according to opinion polls. As of May, 6 in 10 wanted the monarchy to continue. 37% favored it skipping a generation to Prince William, while only 34% favored Charles. It's easy to see why. William and his photogenic wife, Duchess Kate, their children seem to have been molded to be the perfect monarch and family, at least as defined during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Like the Queen, their popularity ratings are consistently high. Unlike her, they are young and more in touch with the modern era. Prince William even sang on stage with Taylor Swift in 2013. Wow. But they echo the apolitical blandness that was the key to Queen Elizabeth's popularity. Skipping a generation is not, of course, the way the system works. A future King Charles would be a difficult figure for Britons and the world to warm to. At 73, he's past normal retirement age. Britons have fixed, often unfavorable opinions of him, particularly after the wildly popular Netflix series The Crown, reminding viewers of Charles' unfaithfulness to the hugely popular Princess Diana. Prince William, by contrast, appears to have grasped the unspoken rules by which Queen Elizabeth II regained and retained respect for the British monarchy. She took to heart that what Walter Bagehot, or Bagehot, Bagehot, don't know the pronunciation there, the editor of the respected British Economist magazine in the late 19th century, argued, quote, The British monarchy was the dignified branch whose job was to symbolize the state through pomp and ceremony. The efficient branch was the government. It ran the country by passing laws and providing public services. Queen Elizabeth II was the very model of a monarch. The bicycle monarchies, so called because their monarchs often rode bicycles and behaved more like commoners of Scandinavian countries or Netherlands, were not for her. She stayed scrupulously apolitical through 15 prime ministers. None, at least publicly, ever knew where she stood politically. So the bottom line is this: will a King Charles III have what it takes to keep the Britons and the world's respect for the monarchy, even as a place warmer for King William? Queen Elizabeth had far more advantages when she ascended the throne. She was young, just 25. No tabloids fixated on royal scandal, real or invented. That's true. Respect for the monarchy was also in Britain's DNA back then, as my father personified. Once again, this is Ms. Branson. She is writing this. Louise Branson. She is writing this. Born in 1913, Ms. Branson's father was 39 when she became his fourth royal monarch. When Ms. Branson was growing up in British colonial Africa in the 1960s and 70s, he would gather us around the static, crackling radio in the sweltering heat every Christmas to listen to the Queen's Christmas Day address, broadcast over the BBC World Service. Missing it would have been unthinkable to him and most Britons at the time. We listened to our Queen. This is what it means to be British, he would say. Of course, it was also very different. Downton Abbey, kind of Britain back in his day. It still had an empire, the biggest in history, ruling over more than 20% of the world's population. The sun, as the saying goes, never set on the British Empire, meaning it was always daytime in one of its territories: Canada, Australia, India, Barbados, elsewhere. Britannia, a song of that time, held rules the waves. The decline of Britain during the long reign of Queen Elizabeth II has been dramatic. The collapse of the empire, the transformation of a rigid class society, today's more secular multicultural model, a country rocked by identity-challenging events like Brexit, not to mention insider accusations of royal family dysfunction, the first from the late Princess Diana, now from Prince Harry and his American wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. The test will be what polls say after Prince Charles has been the monarch for a year or so. Some things he plans are, on their face, laudable. He reportedly wants to trim the number of royals on the taxpayer payroll. Recently, when Barbados voted to ditch Queen Elizabeth as its constitutional head of state, Charles made a speech in which he lamented past slavery, a smart nod to today's more woke Black Lives Matter world. But can he follow his mother's rules that have preserved the monarchy standing? Perhaps history holds a lesson. King Louis XV of France is famously, if apocryphally, quoted as saying what Queen Elizabeth may fear: "Après moi le déluge," after me the deluge. The French Revolution did eventually abolish the French monarchy. Could the British monarchy go the same way if Charles and his unpopular wife, the Queen Consort Camilla, fails to be sufficiently dignified and apolitical? On the other hand, the monarchy did survive after a previous King Charles had his head chopped off in 1649. I doubt that anything like this will be following, or at least in the future, of King Charles III. But here we are in this circumstance where England is now dealing with King Charles, the first half day of his reign. Like I said, a lot of people they have their own political ideologies about Prince Charles and what they believe he means to England. All I can say on this is as follows. I am sure that King Charles III, King Charles, will be just fine. I believe he will do the same things that his mother did. I believe that he will stabilize the monarchy, and I believe that he will take the opportunity to both discover the monarchy for himself, as well as bring the future king, the now heir apparent of the throne in England, Prince William. They will bring themselves to, shall we say, a moving monarchy together. They will indeed learn from each other. At least that's what I believe would happen. That's what I believe should happen. I believe the monarchy is fine. I do believe that there are problems that will probably be relegated to what happens in the monarchy when things begin to split. Prince Andrew's dalliances with Jeffrey Epstein and his circles of friends, and Prince Harry and Ms. Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They have created damage to the family, up to and including Duchess Meghan, for whatever reason, accusing the royal family of racism, which I found absolutely inappropriate. I also found something else about that whole thing. If there's any big threat to the monarchy, it's not Charles. It's Meghan and Prince Harry, because of the willingness for those two to accuse the monarchy of things that are indefensible and perhaps completely untrue. Now, Prince Philip was known for remarkably insensitive, bordering on racial statements. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Meghan did hear some things, certainly from the British tabloids, having to do with her background, her interactions with Prince Harry, and their child. And that may be said, but the British tabloids are a long, long way from the royal family. And while Prince Philip, indeed, was part of the royal family, he was an in-law. The actual family itself could distance themselves from the ramblings of Prince Philip. Prince Philip, probably responsible for a little bit of the difficulty between England, Great Britain, and Prince Charles. Because, as it turns out, he was not really enamored with Prince Charles. I'm talking about Prince Philip. He found him to be kind of weak and treated him like that. I guess trying to toughen him up, I suppose. Well, arguably it may have worked. You also have to remember that Lord Mountbatten was the prime mentor of Prince Charles, when Prince Philip pretty much just shunted him off. The great Lord Mountbatten, who refused to change his name after the family changed theirs regarding the politics of World War II and Nazi Germany, because Mountbatten, of course, is a German name. But that being said, he refused to change his name and really knew what being the King of England was all about. And his life cut short by an IRA bombing in the 70s. And that was damaging to Prince Charles. It was. Now, how he has grown and changed over the years, that remains to be seen. His monarchy will tell the tale. What I'm interested in more of this than anything else, is that tabloid mentality that was just essentially discussed by Louise Branson in that piece. Oh my gosh, the unthinkable. King Charles III. And then talked about how his dalliance with Ms. Camilla, the Queen consort, was outrageous and upsetting to millions of Englanders or millions of Britons. The thing about that is that we don't know where she stands on that. She may be someone who is a fierce devotee of Princess Diana. And by the way, there were a lot of people like that. And maybe they can never forgive Prince Charles for his moves. I know they seem strange, and I know they may be odd, but they are 25 years old at this point. And all I can say is that maybe there are times to, put the clubs down and start thinking about the realities of the situation today, as opposed to 25 years ago. So how will King Charles III rule? We do not know. We do not know. But one thing is for sure. We will see a New England. We will see a new Great Britain. I can hardly wait to hear the first statement of King Charles III. Likely will come tomorrow. There will be a coronation. There will be many things that will happen in the coming days that will teach us all. The last time this happened was 70 years ago, more than 70 years ago. And we will see just exactly how Great Britain welcomes a new king. We'll cover it too here on the Wells Report. You are listening to that broadcast. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Now, in case you're wondering, by the way, the British royal family is set up as follows. Queen Elizabeth, who ruled from, I don't know what that meant. Oh, she lived from the year 1900 to 2002. Was the wife of King George VI, who died in 1952. In other words, Queen Elizabeth was the Queen Mother. They had two children, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip of Greece, who married Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark and the Duke of Edinburgh. They had four children. And let's see, the other child of the original Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and King George VI was Princess Margaret. Okay. So then you have Queen Elizabeth, who married Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark and the Duke of Edinburgh. And they had 4 children. They had King Charles is the heir to the throne, and indeed is now King Charles III. Camilla is the queen consort. In other words, the king's main squeeze. Their children, obviously, of Lady Diana Spencer, Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, Prince Harry of Wales, the Duke of Sussex. And they have Prince William and Catherine have Prince George of Cambridge, Princess Charlotte of Cambridge, and Prince Louis of Cambridge, all absolutely gorgeous children. Meanwhile, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, who was born in 2019. They also have Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, who was born in 2021. So that is the official line of succession. So it will be King Charles III, followed by Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, followed by Prince George of Cambridge. He is the next in line for the throne, third in line for the throne. And so there you go. I just thought you'd like to know a little bit about that. You know, I'm not much of a royals watcher. I never have been. And the reason I'm not much of a royals watcher is because I'm an American. All right? I'm an American. As somebody said earlier today, hey, look, you know, it took us an awful lot of blood and treasure and so on to get away from them, get away from England. And that's exactly what we did. And when that happened, those ties were broken. They do remain in Canada. There is a parliamentary system in Canada, very much like there is in Scotland and other places in England and Great Britain. And so in the Commonwealth, essentially. And so now we're in a position where, okay, the Queen has passed. It is an important part of world history. But does it affect the United States itself? The answer is, of course, no. On the other hand, there are certain things that you have to keep in mind. The royal families of Europe are responsible for a great deal of the Western civilization. They are responsible for the, shall we say, civilization of the world, as all great empires are. They can bring about a more civilized way of living. Okay, arguably imposed through force. I get that. And that certainly is the case with Great Britain. But then again, you know, what would our world look like without these people? It would be a much different place. A far, far different place. The royal families of Europe have made their mark on every corner of this globe. And one of the great sovereigns has now passed. She saw England through World War II. I mean, she did as a young woman. She was a princess at the time. But the Cold War was raging when she took the crown in 1952. And she moved forward through all of that, all of the things that happened in her lifetime and the lifetime of England as she reigned and not ruled. She did bring a humility to the crown that hadn't been there before. There was very little "because I say so" in Queen Elizabeth. Something tells me that will be the case with King Charles III. I don't know. We will see. How long will he rule? There's no telling. You need to understand, Queen Elizabeth was 96 when she passed. Charles has lived an incredibly healthy life. He may be with us for quite some time. But I think what I said earlier bears repetition. and that is this. I believe that Prince William and King Charles will very much work together for a greater monarchy and a greater Britain. They will arguably make Great Britain great again. Maybe that's optimism, but I think that there's a real chance here. And I certainly hope the British royal family takes it moving forward and takes the people of England with them. This is the Wells Report, back for hour 2 in just a moment. And okie dokie. Glad you're here. Get on with the rest of the stories of the day, and we'll be back momentarily. See ya. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We report the news. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each. We make commentary, and then we debate. That's what we do on this broadcast, and I certainly hope you join us in those efforts. I'll report the news. I'll analyze it for fact and bias. If you see something I missed, by all means, tell me what you've seen and share it with me. Now, my commentary is not news. My commentary is simply my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So if you have issues with my opinion, by all means, please share your thoughts. It will be great to hear from you. So this was the day that Queen Elizabeth II died. King Charles III is now the new sovereign of Great Britain. We covered that exhaustively last hour. If you missed that part of it, just go back and you'll see that on your podcast. And again, thanks for joining us. Here in the United States, power is somewhat different. There seems to be a well-worn and now well-used ability to co-opt, law enforcement at varying levels to be able to further political aims or punish those that got in the way of political aims from years ago. That brings us seamlessly to Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon surrendered to New York authorities, and this is being reported by USA Today. I want you to note the way this article is being discussed. Steve Bannon, a longtime advisor to former President Donald Trump, pled not guilty today to new criminal charges involving an alleged fundraising scheme. Bannon and the, quote, We Build the Wall, unquote, nonprofit organization are charged with 2 counts of money laundering, plus felony counts of conspiracy and scheme to defraud. Bannon and the group also faces a misdemeanor count of conspiracy to defraud. And therefore, we now turn to the incredibly partisan New York Attorney General Letitia James. She said this in a statement, quote, There cannot be one set of rules for everyday people and another for the wealthy and powerful. We must all play by the same rules and must obey the law, unquote. The case is expected to echo aspects of a previous federal criminal case that accused Bannon and 3 co-defendants of conspiring to dupe donors who contributed more than $25 million to build a security wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Those who ponied up to a crowdfunding campaign, yours truly was one of them, I think I gave him $25, were assured of all the money raised would go toward the construction project, helping to boost a signature goal of the Trump White House. However, the federal indictment in the case alleges that Bannon and his co-defendants secretly siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations. Bannon collected more than $1 million via a nonprofit organization he controlled and used the funds to pay personal expenses and other costs, according to federal prosecutors. Okay, I'll talk about that in just a second. I just wanted to point out something here. Bannon surrendered for arraignment this morning shortly after 9 a.m. He walked to the Manhattan Criminal Court. He told reporters and onlookers that prosecution against him is political. This is irony. On the very day the mayor of this city has a delegation down on the border they're persecuting here. Bannon was yelling over the hecklers, referring to New York City Mayor Eric Adams' delegation of officials sent to the southern border earlier this week on a fact-finding mission regarding migrants being bused from Texas to New York. This is something that he brings the irony in, that he was ostensibly working to build a wall and yet found himself in a position where now, because of the effects of not building that wall and not finishing that wall, there are people coming to New York City. I guess that's a good point to bring up, I suppose, if you're Steve Bannon. One heckler yelled back, "Stop hurting America, you greasy two-bit grifter." Steve Bannon is a lot of things. He's not a greasy two-bit grifter. In the federal case, the alleged conspirators pled not guilty. Trump pardoned Bannon in the closing days of the White House term. That aborted the federal case against the strategist. Now, keep something in mind. The federal government has already come after Steve Bannon on this. What's going on is that former Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance decided to try to prefer state charges, which a federal pardon has nothing to do with. And so that launched an investigation of this alleged scheme using state criminal statutes. Alvin Bragg, Vance's successor as Manhattan's top local prosecutor, continued the investigation, leading to the anticipated new charges. The case is not only the criminal matter entangling Bannon, who's 68 years old, the media executive and right-wing political strategist who served as an advisor in the Trump White House and remained in contact with Trump even after he was pushed out. Bannon was convicted in July on 2 counts of contempt for refusing to appear before the Special House Committee investigating January 6th, 2021. Committee members sought testimony and documents from Bannon because he was believed to be in contact with President Trump during the weeks leading to the attack on the Capitol. Bannon, who is scheduled to be sentenced in October on that conviction, said after the verdict he planned to file an appeal. Yes, he will, and it will likely be successful. Because I don't know what happened in this particular case, but it was a D.C. court, a D.C. courtroom, D.C. jurors. What I would be very interested in is maybe a change of venue for the actual appeal, although that will go to a circuit court, I suppose. And so there will be, unfortunately, it'll be the D.C. court. So if they do indeed appeal, then there will be a circumstance whereby somebody needs to connect the fact that Eric Holder did not appear for congressional subpoenas either. The difference is the January 6th committee went forward with something that most congressional committees just don't do, going after administration officials under those circumstances. The Republicans refused to chase Eric Holder. Why? You'll have to ask them. But they have no problem whatsoever chasing those people who worked with President Donald Trump. Is that fair and equitable? Is it equal protection under the law? In no way, shape, or form is that. In other words, will still Steve Bannon's appeal prevail in a D.C. Circuit Court? I don't know. I don't have any idea. Did I ever get my $25 back? No. But that does bring me, I never really chased it either. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is this. There's a certain circumstance having to do with this political machination using state criminal statutes. And the fact that all of this is coming down regarding January 6th. What I find very interesting here is I find that now we're in a position where what we have simply people being punished because they worked with President Trump. This is very political. Now, I believe it's political. I believe this is all very political. I believe that the Attorney General of New York is incredibly partisan. And I believe that she thinks that she's got her moment to go after high Donald Trump officials, Trump administration officials, and she's taking it. That's all well and good, I suppose. But all I can say is this is in no way, shape, or form equal justice under the law. And I also want to point out that when we go through all of this, that this political prosecution is incredibly damaging. It's incredibly damaging. It will hurt this nation. And so, what I want to do is I want to ask you this question. Do you believe all of this chasing of Steve Bannon and Trump officials, do you believe it's politically motivated? Or do you believe that this is just ugly corruption within the walls of the Trump administration? And if you believe that, what do you believe about the alleged corruption inside the walls of the Biden administration? In other words, if you believe that the Trump administration was indeed corrupt, what do you think of the Biden administration? Because there is clear evidence that something untoward is going on with regards to the Biden family. Those circumstances have all been investigated and debunked regarding President Trump. There are certain things that are currently going on right now. The Mar-a-Lago papers are certainly being poured over. There is all kinds of political intrigue about that. And we'll see where all that leads. But if it leads to the same place everything else, every other charge that has been preferred against Donald Trump, it's not going to go very far. It's just not going to go very far. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't get Bannon for something. I mean, you have to understand that federal law enforcement is essentially accomplished by two kinds of people. They are lawyers and accountants. Lawyers and accountants. Because most federal crime is what they say is white-collar crime. And so there are an awful lot of accountants in the FBI. The question is, are they actually running the numbers? Or are they do they have a predestined idea of what they are trying to do, which is to essentially take Steve Bannon out of circulation in disgrace, thereby, I guess, tainting President Trump? Is that what they're doing? Is that their idea? Is that a political end? I believe it is. But do you believe it is? Who cares what I think? Do you believe that chasing Steve Bannon and other high Trump administration officials is political or justified? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let me know what you think. Is this justified or is this a political prosecution? 817-379-2172. You can also join us right here on the chat room. I'm looking at it right this very moment. You're listening to the Wells Report. Again, our telephone number 817-379-2172. Hoping that you will join us and tell us what you believe. Is Steve Bannon actually innocent, or is he part of a sinister conspiracy? By the way, that money laundering thing, I'll explain some of that next. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us on our broadcast today. We're discussing Steve Bannon. We're discussing the so-called conspiracy that he's being charged with to defraud donators or people who donated to the We Build the Wall Fund, which was a 501c3. They are charging money laundering. This is something that has happened a few times here in Texas. And what it involves is how a 501c3 can essentially donate money to another 501c3. And apparently that's what the federal government was looking at in their now defunct case against Steve Bannon. Because what they're doing is they're looking at him moving money from the 501c3 We Build the Wall to another fund, and then using that 501c3 to essentially buy things for his personal use, which is strictly verboten. Now, if they can make that stick, okay, then obviously Steve Bannon made a mistake. He not only did he hanky, but he pankied as well. And will that splatter on Donald Trump? Probably not. But at some point, you got to look at this and go, how far is this justice system willing to go to punish Donald Trump and high Trump administration officials? Now, Steve Bannon declared his innocence today at an arraignment. We'll see how that works out. I don't know what the feds have on him, but they are pretty good at cases like this. So there might be some trouble there. I don't know. But also President Trump, as you well know, is also under legal scrutiny. Among the statutes cited in the search warrant for former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate is one that prohibits obstruction of justice. This, by the way, is an op-ed piece by Barbara McQuaid. She is an opinion columnist for USA Today. She points out that one of the things that was discussed in the affidavit and even in the search warrant was potential obstruction of justice. That offense may sound familiar. It was one of the potential crimes investigated during the Trump presidency by special counsel Robert Mueller. They didn't find it. Complex crimes can be difficult to prove, but ham-handed efforts to intimidate witnesses or conceal documents can be comparatively simple. Mueller was unable to find sufficient evidence to prove that Trump conspired with Russia to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. But he did find what are called 10 instances of potential obstruction of justice. Now remember, this is quasi-honest journalism because they say, well, instances of potential obstruction of justice. There is no such crime as potential obstruction of justice. So why are we discussing it as if it was a crime? Attempted murder is different than murder. Attempted murder is an attempt at a crime. That, however, doesn't necessarily work when it comes to obstruction of justice. There is no potential obstruction of justice. Now, they're looking at the fact that Mueller examined were Trump's efforts to dissuade witnesses like Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, and Michael Cohen from cooperating against him. Mueller also investigated Trump's directive to former White House counsel Don McGahn to create a false document to conceal Trump's order to fire Mueller. But strangely, of course, what did not happen is that Mueller then refused to take a look at the fact that the FBI had altered information on a piece of evidence used to convince the FISA court to wiretap Trump campaign officials. See, all of these decisions, all of these decision-making to essentially wash one hand over the other when it comes to leftist politics are coming home to roost. More in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Yeah. Looking at the chat room, Mike Renwee reports that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, is going to appeal the special master decision, this being egged on by former Attorney General Bill Barr. I don't really know what Bill Barr is doing, but I have long asserted, that there are people in the Republican Party that have no problem whatsoever sabotaging President Donald Trump. What's interesting about that is that is essentially not their job. Republican voters not only voted President Trump into office, but also voted him to return to office in the last election in 2020. And so now what we have here is we have a Republican Party and one of their high officials doing their dead level best to create as much problem for Trump as possible. In other words, not only do the Democrats not want Donald Trump to run, but apparently neither does Bill Barr. Now, the thing about this is this special master, as federal district judge Eileen Cannon said, that the former president of the United States is not a typical citizen, that his profession can be badly damaged by the assertions that would be put forward with what are loosely based indictments against him. And that's what she said. And she's very rightly saying that there needs to be fairness in this process. And with the miscreancy, the outright miscreancy of the Department of Justice and the FBI, they are not trustworthy at this time. Now, I suppose that with an appeal, Attorney General Merrick Garland may find a group of judges that would agree that the FBI is simply above reproach and that the DOJ would never do anything that would stray from equal protection under the law, which is patent garbage. It's just plain garbage. Now, the court operates in a conveniently concocted bubble or vacuum where all they have to do is look at the law, which is fine if that's all they do. But as we've seen, when it comes to judicial activism, they don't just look at the law. They don't just call balls and strikes. Sometimes they decide who wins and who loses. And so our situation goes like this. By the way, the decision of wins and losses is based on politics, not law. I want to clarify that statement. So here we are in this gigantic mess whereby Merrick Garland is essentially paying for the sins of decisions made before he became the Attorney General. But those decisions were made. And they are political. Hillary Clinton is not or has not been indicted and has faced 16 counts of violation of the Espionage Act because of politics. The hypocrisy involved in bringing that same act into play with regards to President Trump and his keeping of papers from his administration, that hypocrisy will not fly with the American people. It simply will not. And it will badly damage what's left of the tattered reputation of the FBI and the DOJ. As far as the way he handled those papers, he had them stored as papers in boxes in a storeroom, guarded by the Secret Service. A noted other high political official, specifically a former Secretary of State, had a server outside of a secured compartmented information facility, which she had in her own house, that was penetrated by several extracurricular, or other words, outside the U.S., national security services, including Red China. Now, what is the chance of damage to the United States, a damage assessment done by the Department of Homeland Security, or it's the Director of National Intelligence? What do you suppose he'd find if he went back and looked at all those emails and all the fact that all of that information, private state business, including top secret SCI materials, were found on Hillary's server that was later found to have been penetrated by non-U.S. national intelligence services? But that never happened. So now what we have is the Director of National Intelligence looking at a box of physical paper guarded by the Secret Service, and will come up with some sort of presumption as to just exactly how damaging this was to the United States. Yeah, we'll see. But once again, you now move forward in all of this. Now we have a situation where the Biden administration has a real problem with Hunter Biden and his laptop. And what we're doing here is we're having the president excoriated for having boxes of material when the FBI has computers full of it and have had that information that plainly show what we've seen, by the way, plainly show Hunter Biden committing felony after felony after felony. And we have emails that are out in the public that absolutely scream for real prosecution. And again, these decisions were made by politics, but they have frank effect unless we simply want to say, okay, all the political crap that we did up until August 8th, that's all gone. We're now moving from August 8th forward, and we'll be fair and equitable moving forward. Is that going to fly? The answer is no, that's not going to fly. Not going to fly. And that's also something that you got to look at when it comes to Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon is playing games according to the federal government. He is alleged to have played games with money. Really? Well, what about the money that Hunter Biden actually collected? What about that? All of these nefarious business deals behind Donald Trump that have been chased down by prosecutor after prosecutor after prosecutor. Why aren't they doing the same thing with Hunter Biden? Because of politics. But what my point isn't, okay, they're going after the good guys and the bad guys are being left alone. That's not the point. I don't care that Hillary had a private server. Am I worried about what happened to those documents on that private server after the server was penetrated by foreign intelligence services? Hell yes. Do I find it disturbing that she had a skiff in her own house but wanted to protect her privacy so much that she risked American national security because of it? Yes, I'm very upset about that. Am I upset that she was let go? Yes and no. I really don't want to see a First Lady of the United States indicted, prosecuted, and then possibly sent to jail. For that matter, I don't want to see a Secretary of State in that position either. And I would have left it at that, except nobody is above the law, they keep saying. No one is above the law. Merrick Garland says no one is above the law. January 6th committee, no one is above the law. But there are people that are above the law. You and I all know it. In Steve Bannon's case, Eric Holder. When it comes to Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. When it comes to all of these things, these decisions were made, and that's the point. They made political decisions regarding law enforcement. And somehow the people of the United States are expected to say, okay, the age of political enforcement of the law is over. Now we're going to get down and do it by the book. No, No, you're not going to be able to do that. You're simply not. By the way, I just thought of something. You know the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Family Foundation? What was that other one of theirs? They had another one. They had another foundation. You know, what I brought up at the time was, gosh, you know, with that server out in the open and other countries accessing it, did anybody go back, and I asked this at the time, did anybody go back and say, okay, did the intelligence services of some nations get information from that server and then make a donation to one of the foundations with the Clinton name on it? If so, that would be, yes, treason. That would be espionage. It'd be awful. Did anybody ever chase that down? No. There are likewise alleged irregularities having to do with the money changing hands in the Biden family. There are hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Are they being acted on? No. No, they're not. But boy, they sure chased down Steve Bannon in that wall fund. They sure chased that down. As a matter of fact, after Bannon got pardoned by the president, the state of New York took over and preferred state charges against Steve Bannon on a case that was already blown up by the presidential pardon of Steve Bannon. So what we're doing is we're going after Steve Bannon in New York court, but nobody's going after anything having to do with Hunter Biden. And again, the particulars I don't really care about. What I care about is what's left. After all of this is taken care of, after all these decisions have been made, what's left? And I'll tell you what's left. What's left is an American people that absolutely cannot trust the FBI, that cannot believe that they have equal protection under the law with regards to this Department of Justice. It goes farther than that. All of us look at the Director of National Intelligence, the Office of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA to a lesser degree. All of these organizations are now political tools to be wielded by a particular kind of politician. Now, that being said, we have a Department of Homeland Security because of another kind of politician. I'll let you fill in the gaps. The Patriot Act, okay, I'll flesh it out. The Patriot Act was created by the Republican Party and people of the Republican Party. The Patriot Act, and it's no doubt, was abused by people of the Democrat Party and continues to be. Unless, of course, you can go back to the Bush administration or the Trump administration and find the IRS going after liberal-based 501c3s. Unless you can find that, then I will tell you that the deep state is something that the American people should not only not trust, but fear. And that's what we're left with because of all of these politics. Now, arguably, all this is perfectly fine if you live in a state where everybody understands that they're under totalitarian rule and that you have to stay out of the way of the politics of that totalitarian rule, or you will finish your life in the gulag. But that's not the country we have. And I don't see that country ever coming to fruition either. And I'll tell you why. It won't come to fruition because the American people will not tolerate it. And what they're trying to do is intimidate Americans out of that idea. Hey, if you're fighting for this, if you brave right-wing Republicans, you guys are going to fight against the country just for American freedoms or so on and so on, you better bring an F-15. Really, Mr. President? You know, I don't have to point out that there are ways to defeat F-15s that are plainly available to Americans. They simply are. And all I can say is that that's done for a reason, because we get to defend ourselves from a totalitarian government. How far do they want to go with this? I just don't know. You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. Okay, so I was challenging somebody to tell me a little bit about how the IRS was used against, say, for example, 501c3s in the Bush administration. And that comes down to one Salon article. I always double source things. I can't find another source for it, because all I can find are speeches about the President Bush talking to the NAACP and trying to improve things for Black Americans, etc. And but I do find something that had to do with the threat from the IRS during the Bush administration to revoke an activist church in Pasadena, California, an activist church's tax-exempt status for what would be repeated political statements from the pulpit. They never went anywhere. The damage done by President Obama's IRS, people wanted to put 501c3s together, but because they were of a conservative nature, and this was proven, they were not allowed to even exist, which oppressed political dissent in our nation. So that's one of the things that I'm looking on. I'll continue to do this stuff. What I want you to understand, no, Randy, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. I just thought you had left, and I wanted to make sure that if you were still there, I said, no, don't go. Stay with us. Anyway, Randy, that was just a little aside from the chat room. I interact with the chat room all the time. So there you go. So anyway, that being said, what I'm trying to point out here is the disparity between the way the government handles some people of some political ideologies versus the way they handle people of a differing one. That's the point of all of this. You get down into the sewer of this he said, she said, tit for tat, whataboutism, blah, 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 and you miss the entire point. The entire point is far more basic. We should have equal protection under the law, period. When a high government law enforcement official is tempted to play politics with the law, that person must stop themselves. In this particular case, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is on a losing train here. He needs to stop. Just like the impeachments. All it did was damage the nation. It didn't damage Trump. It didn't damage Trump. All it did was damage the nation. That guy had higher approval ratings among the American people after 95% of everything those people heard about the president was negative. For 4 years, he had higher approval ratings than except the very early parts of the Biden administration, as President Biden has. It's documented. But what we have here is we have this, apparently there's this carte blanche to go after Donald Trump, and it threatens the very core of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States, and federal law enforcement. How far are we going to go to essentially communicate to the people of the United States, you better go with a political hierarchy, you better go with a political dogma, you better go with a political status quo ante, or we're going to stomp you? How far are we going to go before that is the prevailing attitude in the United States? We've had all kinds of warning signals. 70% of Americans believe the number one threat to American liberty and freedom is the government of the United States. That was years ago. Has that gotten better or worse under this administration? Yeah, it's gotten worse. So much so that they're afraid to ask the question. The right track, wrong track thing. 80% of Americans believe that the country is on the wrong track. See, it doesn't really make any difference who's in power. It doesn't make any difference which party rules the roost. Because what we have here is we have a government run amok. $30.8 trillion in national debt. And we're honestly giving away $1.7 trillion for political garbage, vote buying of anything, of all kinds. Where does that leave you? Where does that leave you? It concerns me greatly. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being here today. Coming up in just a little bit, we have Leftism Update. Leftism Update. Leftism Update. Yeah, Leftism Update is where the science of liberalism essentially is put out there and follows this track that leads right back to its own head and it starts engulfing itself. Yeah. This is the liberal wing of American politics chasing its tail. I'll give you some examples next. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We'll be back with more. Hour number 3 in just a moment. Once again, you all, thanks very much for being with us today. It means an awful lot to me. It does. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We report it every single day. The real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We comment on those three things: news, facts, and bias. The commentary is not news. It's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. So why don't you share yours with me? That's the debate part. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. This, by the way, was the day we lost Queen Elizabeth II. She was 96 years old. She died in Balmoral Castle in Scotland today. The family is gathering. The plans are being made for her funeral. King Charles III is now the ruling sovereign of Great Britain. What will be his first few days, if not years, as the King of England? We'll see. By the way, if you want to know more about that, all you got to do is go to the first hour of this broadcast, because we covered it in depth. And we're glad you're here. So, we've been talking about in the last hour especially, we talked a little bit about political decision-making when it comes to things that should not be politically based, like, for example, federal law enforcement. However, it is common knowledge that indeed there is political law enforcement among the federal police agencies in this nation at this time. We've talked about what that kind of thing means to the people of the United States, what it means to the Biden administration. I've said several times the FBI and the DOJ has to take a look at their future as currently constituted or unconstituted, as the case may be. You've got to look at that future and you've got to say, okay, does the FBI want to be the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or does it want to be the U.S. government's secret police? That's a decision they have to make. And they don't have a lot of time to make it. Based on that decision as to whether or not the Federal Bureau of Investigation wants to be the U.S. secret police, or whether it wants to be an even-handed, objective enforcer of federal law, and as called by the Constitution, provide equal justice for all. If it wants to do that, things pretty much stay normal. If, however, it wants to, continue being the secret police of the United States, that's going to change the Biden administration into something different. The Biden regime. Because regimes have secret police. What's different between, say, for example, a political machine where the media and a particular political party and a bunch of backhand deals and so on and so forth come together to create a power structure that serves only the power structure and not the people it's supposed to serve? What's the difference between, say, for example, a political machine and a regime? Law enforcement. Because it's one thing to have politics rule the media. It's one thing to have politics rule public policy. That's what politics are. But when you start enforcing those politics as if they were law, and you start using the law in a grotesque and ugly way to savage your political opponents simply because they're your political opponents, that becomes something completely different. And before you know it, you're making decisions you shouldn't be making. Let me give you an example of burgeoning totalitarianism. So, California Governor Gavin Newsom just shepherded a bill through the California Assembly that will essentially ban gasoline-powered cars in California by 2035. People in California are leaving in droves. And it's not a fit place to live. go to any of the big cities. It's just not a fit place to live. And so people are leaving. And if this person, this Gavin Newsom guy, honestly believes that a state that has a power grid that can't support its needs on a hot day is somehow going to supply the electrical needs of 30 million electric cars, not only is he dreaming, he's just plain delirious. He's out of his mind. It's simply not going to work. I was watching, a nuclear physicist or somebody having to do with nuclear power generation. California would have to essentially refurbish Rancho Seco, Diablo Canyon, which they're doing, by the way, and San Onofre. They would have to rebuild those, plus add another 10 more nuclear power plants to keep up with electric cars in their state. It takes 20 years to build a nuclear reactor. It's 2022. 20 years, 2042. What are you going to do in those 7 years when there are no gasoline-powered cars allowed in California? And there's no way to keep the power consumption where it needs to be for electric cars? What are you going to do in the meantime? The answer is they don't know. They don't have a plan. This was funny. Over the last week, California Independent Systems Operator, that's CAISO, CAISO, the state's electric grid operator, warned that high demand would significantly strain utility providers' ability to supply customers electricity amid a record heat wave. In other words, they're incompetent. They can't do their job. They can't keep the power on. CAISO issued an Energy Alert 3. That's their highest alert level, saying the residents should maximize conservation and expect rotating outages and a flex alert for the 8th consecutive day on Wednesday evening. You can thank the governor for giving all Americans a view of their quote-unquote clean energy future, said Will Swaim, the president of the California Policy Center. He was talking to Fox News. He has been the absolute pinnacle of environmentalist policy. So why am I bringing this up? Because Gavin Newsom, distanced from reality, making decisions hard and fast, passing law that are based on just plain unreality, wants to be the president of the United States beginning in 2025 after the 2024 election. Now, I'm not writing this. This is being written by Fox News, so there is intrinsic bias in it. But do you honestly believe that Americans are going to allow California Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom to run this nation the way he's run California? Do you honestly believe that's going to happen? Then there's this. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has declared an emergency because of migrant buses coming from Texas and Arizona. Here is the copy again from Fox News. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser declared a public emergency over buses of migrants that continue to arrive in the city from Texas and Arizona. Bowser's emergency declaration will set aside funding to accommodate migrants as well as create the Office of Migrant Services. OMS will be tasked with providing temporary accommodations, urgent medical needs, transportation, and other service for migrants. We're putting in place a framework that would allow us to have a coordinated response with our partners, said Bowser. This will include a program to meet all buses. Given that most people will move on, our primary focus is to make sure we have a humane, efficient, welcome process that allows people to move on to their final destinations. Regardless of the federal response, which I think has been lacking in some respects, the District of Columbia would continue to work with partners to advance what we need to ensure our systems in D.C. are not broken by a crisis that is certainly not of our making. Well, now, wait a minute. Washington, D.C. is a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants. So dozens of buses. So filled with 52 people. So what are we talking about? We're talking about 1,200 migrants going to Washington, D.C. and New York City in recent months. So let's just assume, okay, that dozens of buses, let's say 24, 52, that's 1,200 people. And let's just go ahead and add on because, well, let's say 2,400 people. That's 1% of the number of people that crossed into Texas alone. 1%. Well over 200,000 people come to Texas every month. And Muriel Bowser is declaring a public emergency for 2,500 people? She would melt down if she was the governor of Texas. She'd never be the governor of Texas. But that being said, look at the hypocrisy. All of these years profiting mightily by being a sanctuary city. By golly, we think that immigrants are wonderful, especially the illegal ones. Yeah, we think they're so wonderful. We have one set of laws for them and another set of laws for us. For example, if you go out and kill somebody in a DUI, by golly, you're going to go to jail. It'll be felony DUI. It'll chase you for the rest of your life. If, however, you are an illegal immigrant, you will be deported. What? What? And then, of course, when you're deported, you'll come back and do it again. There are documented cases of that very thing happening. Rapes and child molestations and so on and so forth. You get out of our country. And they come back and then they kill someone. Wait until that starts happening, Ms. Mayor. Wait until you're in one of those situations. So profiting mightily politically by saying, my gosh, we are a sanctuary city. Okay. Now the realities of being a sanctuary city come to the fore and she declares an emergency. What does that tell you? And then, of course, there's Portland, Oregon. Guess what's happening in Portland, Oregon? You're not going to believe it, but let me just give you a little hint. Portland, Oregon is going to be spending significant time in a courtroom because there's a group of people very upset about the leftist policies that have literally turned Portland, Oregon into the world's most badly run campground. Talk about people leaving. People are just leaving. Absolutely leaving. They're headed out of there as fast as they possibly can. People are leaving California. People are leaving Oregon. People are leaving Washington because they're not fit places to live. This is the Wells Report. We will be back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You know, our city simply has to take care of the homeless. We have to find a way to take care of these homeless people. We have 15,000 homeless people in Portland. And we, as human beings, have to reach out to them and give them a better life. And so plans are made for 15,000 homeless people. And as soon as word gets around that somebody is giving free handouts, suddenly there are 20,000 homeless people, then 50,000 homeless. Oh my God. And pretty soon they're living in tents everywhere, including the sidewalks. And that's what they have in Portland, Oregon. Disabled residents in Portland, Oregon are suing the city over claims that officials have allowed sidewalks to become overrun with homeless camps. See, disabled people have a problem getting down these sidewalks in the first place. Now they have to dodge all these tents. Walkways are inaccessible. It's a class action lawsuit. It was filed Tuesday in federal court. It accuses the city of violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Oregon Public Broadcasting reported the ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability and requires accessible sidewalks. The suit asks that a judge order Portland to clear the sidewalks of homeless camps and tents while providing emergency shelters for all the homeless displaced as a result. Some of the suit's 10 plaintiffs, most of whom use wheelchair canes or walkers, spoke during a news conference on City Hall or at City Hall. The city has abandoned us and the homeless, said Barbara Jacobson, a 62-year-old who uses an electric wheelchair and says that to avoid the tents, she often goes onto the street with the traffic. Steve Jackson's 47 years old. He's blind. He claimed he often accidentally steps on people while navigating crowded sidewalks. Mayor Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, Oregon, unavailable to discuss it. So Gavin Newsom says no more cars. No more gasoline-powered cars. You're going to buy electric cars, and there is not an electric grid in California capable of handling it, and won't be for another 20 years, at least. And what are they going to do? Who knows? Who knows? So then Washington, D.C. declares a citywide emergency because of what, 2,000 homeless people? Or not homeless people, sorry, illegal immigrants? She declares an emergency, sets aside funding, starts creating another bureaucracy to handle people. Well, welcome to Texas, Mayor. Welcome to Arizona. Welcome to New Mexico. Welcome to California. Your policy of saying, my gosh, we are a sanctuary city. Well, just came home to roost. What are you thinking? I think that every sanctuary city in the United States, especially the avowed ones, I believe that that's where every single one of these illegal immigrants, 200,000 just in Texas alone, every month like clockwork, should be taken to. And then the city of Portland, which turned itself into the world's most badly run camping ground. Badly run, they don't have enough sanitation facilities, don't have enough running water, don't have enough room on the sidewalks. What are they going to do when bubonic plague starts running rampant through these homeless camps? What are they going to do? It's just a matter of time. Why is it that these cities run by Democrats seem to want to export squalor? And why is it that people don't realize that that's what they're doing? Your guess is as good as mine. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Let me go to the chat room, see what's cooking. Bring back coal. Yeah, they're going to have to. You're going to have to bring back coal. All of this greenhouse gas emission stuff that they're trying to rid themselves of in California, that's what they're going to depend on to be able to charge these electric cars. There is no excuse for California not having enough electricity. There's no excuse. The reason that California doesn't have enough electricity is because they're playing politics with electricity. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. It's a shame what they did in Portland, Oregon. I remember visiting my daughter in Chicago when it was nice and not the hellhole it has become. Yeah. I mean, I was born in Corvallis, Oregon. I have family to this day living in Portland. I worry for their safety every single day, even if that safety doesn't really have anything to do with being stabbed or shot, which is what's happening in liberal cities across the United States. It's something more mundane like, oh, I don't know, slipping on fresh human feces on the sidewalk. I worry about them. This bubonic plague thing I just brought up, that's not hysteria. That's fact of life. This is what happens when you have a bunch of people living in unsanitary conditions. That's what's happening. Before you know it, disease runs rampant. Unbelievable. Yeah. By the way, there are an awful lot of people that say, well, what we really need to do is we need to put these homeless people in hotels. Oh, yeah? Yeah, you see, the government pays to put these guys in hotels, these families and women and men and so on and so forth. They just put them in hotels, which is an awful lot like government housing, which is an awful lot like the old Soviet Union because everybody lived in government housing. Everyone lived in government housing. They were allocated a place to live. And so these Marxists running these cities are now following in those footsteps, allocating a place for these homeless people to live. The good news is it gets them out of a tent on the sidewalk. The bad news is, before you know it, every single one of those hotels is going to look an awful lot like a jail cell because of the damage that's being done because these people really don't have to take care of these rooms. Arguably, many of them aren't used to taking care of rooms that nice. These people are coming from countries where indoor plumbing is kind of a luxury. Yeah. So anyway, let's put them in hotels. Well, that's government housing. And how do you get a hold of government housing? Well, what you do is you essentially just commandeer it, which is what they're doing in California. The people owning the hotels say, what, are you crazy? You're not going to put those people in here. No, they're being bought off. Pretty soon, the cities are going to go, hey, you know what? We're just going to buy the hotel from you. And that's what they're going to do. And the people who own the hotel, they will go someplace else with the money and likely put up another hotel in a city or a state that hasn't lost its flipping mind. In the meantime, the entrepreneur that just left the hotel he or she built because it just got commandeered by the city or the state leaves that city or state. And what is left? A government bureaucrat with government housing filled with people with no visible means of support. None. No education, no visible means of support. But they're living in government housing in a state without enough electricity to be able to keep the lights on, let alone charge electric cars. This is what socialist government looks like. The only real difference between this kind of socialist government and the typical socialist government is, in a typical socialist government, the people can't afford electric cars because they don't have 60 grand to throw away on a car. They just don't. And while we're on the subject of electric cars and crazy political ideology, let me read you this from Eric D. Lawrence of USA Today. Jeep showed off 2 electric SUVs this week that it plans to launch in North America in the next 2 years. One inspired by the Jeep Wrangler, and the other representing an expansion of the upscale Wagoneer line. Yeah, the Jeep Recon, which prompts visual comparisons to the Wrangler and the Jeep Wagoneer S, are slated for production in 2024, with customer orders beginning early next year. This, according to a news release from the Stellantis brand. Both will be built on the same electric vehicle platform known as the STLA Large, which brand CEO Christian Meunier said showcases Stellantis' ability to capitalize on shared resources. Yeah, sort of like government housing, everybody's sharing resources. Sort of like communism, everybody shares resources. The company didn't provide pricing or say where either vehicle will be built other than North America. Both vehicles will be sold in their markets as well, including Europe. Jeep is targeting a range of 400 miles on a charge, 600 horsepower to 0 to 60 time at 3.5 seconds for the Wagoneer S. This, according to the company. Similar details for the Recon were not provided. And they have a picture of this amazing Jeep Recon with the doors removed. 4-wheeling through the back country, not a road in sight. You know what also isn't in sight? A recharging station. I'm going to get myself a Jeep Recon. I'm going to go out there in the wilds of America. I'm not going to put a dang single carbon footprint out there. Yeah. The only footprints you're going to see from mine will be mine walking back to town, hoping I don't freeze to death or get eaten by a bear or die of thirst or any number of other things. Because my Jeep Recon ran out of juice. Well, you can do that with a regular Jeep, JD. Goodness gracious, man. You're just not in the ballpark when it comes to electric vehicles. No. That's not the case. I think the actual performance of electric vehicles is pretty impressive. However, when it comes to what a Jeep is supposed to be versus what this thing is, does this not offend your sense of basic logic? Let's get back to the running out of gas in the backcountry. People have run out of gas in the backcountry. That's exactly what they've done. You know what they did? Sat there and said, damn it. I misjudged. I ran out of gas. And they get out of their Jeep and they walk back to the back and they grab the 5-gallon jerry can of gasoline that they have and they pour it into their tank. And then they go back to the back of the Jeep and they grab the other 5-gallon jerry can of gasoline and they pour that into the Jeep. Because Jeeps have allowances for 5-gallon jerry cans. They start it up, they grind on it for a couple of minutes so that the fuel pump actually fills back up again and so on and so forth. It starts right up and they drive home. So now you have the Jeep Recon. My God, you ran out of power. Holy crap. What are we going to do now? Well, I'm just going to go back to the 5-gallon battery. So let's see, 5 gallons of gas in a Jeep. Let's say you get 15 miles a gallon, which is probably conservative. That means that you're going to get about 75 miles on one can of gas. 75 miles. Okay? Chances are not likely you're going to be 75 miles away from any place important, which is why you carry 2 jerry cans filled. And actually, you probably get more like 20 miles a gallon, but let's just stick with 15. That's 150 miles. You run out of fuel in an electric car and you're out of fuel. And by the way, a 5-gallon jerry can, the can itself weighs about 10 pounds. 5 gallons is about 40 pounds. So you got 50 pounds. How much do you think a battery that will take you 75 miles weighs? And how, by the way, are you going to plug it into your system? With a gasoline-powered car, you just pour the gasoline into the gas tank. How do you plug in the extra batteries? The answer is you don't. Jeeps are not intended to drive you from Santa Barbara to San Jose on a weekend, stopping at Walmarts along the way to recharge for a few hours up there and back. Jeeps are intended to go out into the backcountry, just like this photo shows. Not a road in sight. Peacefully, beautifully, just going through this rough-ass terrain. My gosh, that's a Jeep for you, boy. No charging stations. Well, I know what you can do, John David. What can you do? I'll just take me a gas generator. Uh-huh. Well, where's the flaw in the logic there? The gas part? Right. The gas part. And oh, by the way, look at this picture of this fantastic Jeep Recon. I'm thinking that those are normal sized doors, so the Jeep Recon has a back trunk area of about like this. I have a 9 kilowatt generator. It's not 9 kilowatts, 9,000 watts. That is 9 kilowatt. Anyway, I've got 9 kilowatt generator in my garage right this minute that runs on gasoline and propane. And it's about this wide. It's not going to fit in the back of that Jeep. And if you can put a generator in the back of the Jeep, where are you going to put your gear? You know, the things you need. Because you're out in the backcountry. You're out there with your fishing rod and your camp chair and your tent and your clothes and your MREs, because you're going to have something to eat as you walk in back 75, 80 miles back to town. Where are you going to put that with your generator in the back of your Jeep? I'll get a trailer. Uh-huh. When was the last time you saw anybody four-wheeling in the backcountry in a Jeep designed to four-wheel in the backcountry, towing a trailer? There you go. So much for the electric-powered Jeep. What a moronic point of view. You know what I would do if I were you? I'd sell my Jeep stock. Now. You know, it's one thing to build the Chevy Volt, okay? It's one thing to build the Ford Spark. It's one thing to do all that. That's okay. That's fine. They've destroyed the Mustang, which really annoys me because the Mustang used to be a great car. Now it looks like another boxy, baloney-filled SUV. But all I can say is this, okay? Those are street cars. Jeep coming up with an electric SUV is sort of like coming up with a convenient way to destroy your jewelry. The new Jeep Jewelry Destroy All. Put in unwanted jewelry, gold and diamonds, and it will grind them up and turn them into essentially volcanic sand. Worthless. Get rid of all that extra jewelry. Electric Jeep. Yeah. The absurdity continues. Rising seas fueled by climate change will swamp U.S. real estate in 30 years. You know, this is one of those articles that you keep, right? This is one of those articles that you keep. And 30 years from now, which will be, I don't know, you'll probably forget it in 30 years. It'll be what, 2052? You bring that out and go, remember when they said that
Rising seas fueled by climate change will swamp the U.S. real estate. I was thinking about that while I was four-wheeling across what used to be the ocean floor from the east coast of the U.S. on my way to Bermuda. It was a nice drive. Until I ran out of electricity, and then all of a sudden, I had to walk the rest of the way.
By the way, there's something else about that particular article. It's not just U.S. real estate. It's the important part of the U.S. real estate. I'll explain in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. So we were talking about the brilliant idea of the electrical powered Jeep. You know, John David, it does seem kind of funny when you talk about it that way. You know, you just can't put enough batteries in your backpack to get your car running again. You just can't do it. But now we have to talk about the fact that, my God, in 30 years, higher tides, supercharged by rising sea levels, could flood all or parts of an estimated $34 billion worth of real estate. $34 billion worth of real estate. My God. Yeah, $34 billion worth of real estate. The president of the United States just spent $500 billion worth of college loan money. We're worried about $34 billion worth? Really? By the way, who owns that property? Do you own that property? I know the Obamas own a lot of beachfront property. But do we care? Within the span of a 30-year mortgage, as many as 64,000 buildings and roughly 637 properties along the oceans and their connecting waterways could be at least partially below tidal boundary level. This, according to the nonprofit Climate Center, stating in a report that was released this morning. Seas are forecasted to rise from 8 inches to 23 inches along the nation's coast by 2050, with the higher increases along the northern Gulf Coast and mid-Atlantic. As the oceans rise, every inch of additional water is expected to move farther inland, making flood events worse and putting more properties at risk. Okay, let's see. $34 billion worth of real estate, 64,000 buildings, 637,000 properties. My gosh, that's alarming. Let's see. So that works out to what? 700,000 properties or so. Beginning on July 24th, 2022, and lasting over a week, several areas of the U.S. were impacted by numerous flash flooding events. These events included parts of Missouri, Illinois, Greater St. Louis, Eastern Kentucky, Southwest Virginia, West Virginia, the Las Vegas Valley. Several rounds of severe thunderstorms began in Missouri on July 24th, culminating during July 25th, blah, 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 blah. What about Jackson, Mississippi? Late July, another precedented flooding event occurred in Las Vegas, Flagstaff and Phoenix, Death Valley National Park. You mean water flowed into Death Valley National Park? My God, what does that mean? Does that mean it's no longer Death Valley? It's called Pleasant Valley now because you can surf. Yeah, the Fort Worth Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. My gosh. Yeah. People actually died. I'm not making light of this. 41 people were killed during the flooding events, 39 in Kentucky, 28, 2 in Missouri, so on and so on. So what happens is that my point in all this is that we're worried about flooding that's going to get into God knows how many properties and how many buildings and so on and so forth, when if you add up, so that's 30 years, add up the next 30 years of flooding events in the United States. You know what? I bet you it's more than 637,000 properties and more than 64,000 buildings that get destroyed. I bet you it's not even close. Let me see what here. While I have a couple of minutes here, let me just toss this out here. Let's see. Jackson, Mississippi flooding. Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. Let's see. What do we got here? The water crisis. Let me see if I can find something here. Okay, I'll just grab this. People in Jackson, Mississippi are going on week 2 without basic clean drinking water. Yeah. And they talk about how they've been on boil notices and all that kind of stuff. Right? On February 2020, Mississippi State Department of Health cited 3 out of 5 rating for drinking water inspections and 16 violations. On and on and on and on and on. There's all kinds of flooding. Mississippi water crisis. It's unclear when the water will be safe to drink. Okay. In other words, why are we having trouble with water in 2022? It's the new millennium, for crying out loud. We have flooding every single year, and yet we're worried about a flood from the ocean in 30 years. Are you flipping nuts? The answer, of course, is yes. They're flipping nuts. Okay, so what's the solution? Well, we got to pay politicians trillions of dollars to fight this flooding. Excuse me? Yeah. Yeah, what we have to do is we have to get on this green energy deal. We got to stop burning gasoline, and that'll keep the water from rising. No, it won't. Well, the ice in Greenland is melting. You do realize, of course, that Greenland got its name thousands of years ago because it was green. Oh. Yeah, of course, we didn't have to worry about $34 billion worth of U.S. real estate, did we? This has been the Wells Report. Thanks very much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. We'll see you again tomorrow. I violated my first rule. The rule of sarcasm. A hybrid has a gas engine. I'm talking about a generator. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah, they have a roller system to swap batteries. Right. Yep. That's right. Rising seas. Crap. Completely. I'm still waiting on the ice age promised in the 70s. Yeah, I'm still waiting too. Uh-huh. Trying to scare. Yes. Yeah. What happens when batteries go to bed? What is this? Oh, what happens when battery goes bad? Yeah, they're thrown into a landfill. All right, you wonderful human beings, I got to go. It's okay. You're sarcastic every day, huh? So you peg your sarcasmometer like I do? There you go. An electric Jeep. Am I the only one that finds the absurdity in that funny? Am I the only one? All right, I'm just asking. The electric Jeep. All right, I got to go. God's blessings on all y'all. Have yourself a wonderful